I invited the state attorney general to my lake cabin for a private meeting about a long-running property dispute that had been affecting several homeowners in the area. We had barely started reviewing the documents when loud banging echoed to the front door. None of us expected what was about to happen next. Rebecca wasn't visiting for a social call. She had spent months investigating complaints involving the HOA board and wanted to compare my records with evidence collected by her office. Every document on that table pointed toward the same troubling pattern. I showed her surveys, emails, certified letters, and years of correspondence with the HOA. The more evidence we reviewed, the clearer the picture became. It looked like several board decisions had ignored both property records and state regulations. Everything was quiet outside the cabin. The lake was perfectly still, and the meeting was moving exactly as planned. Then a loud knock shattered the silence. The knocking quickly turned into shouting. Karen demanded that I open the door immediately and insisted she had the authority to inspect my property. Her voice echoed across the entire lakeshore. I looked at Rebecca, and she simply nodded without saying a word. I walked toward the entrance as calmly as possible. Whatever Karen wanted, she clearly wasn't planning to ask politely. The moment I opened the door, Karen stepped forward and immediately started accusing me of violating HOA rules. She never paused to notice who was sitting only a few feet behind me. Karen continued speaking without looking around the room. Rebecca quietly closed her folder and observed everything without interrupting. The atmosphere became noticeably tense. Rebecca waited patiently for Karen to finish. She never raised her voice or reacted emotionally. Sometimes silence reveals far more than an argument ever could. Karen insisted I leave the cabin immediately because, according to her, the HOA had complete authority over the property. She sounded completely certain. Unfortunately for her, the official records told a very different story. Rebecca finally stood up and introduced herself with remarkable calm. She presented her official credentials and explained that she had been invited to the meeting. The expression on Karen's face changed almost instantly. For several seconds, nobody said a word. Karen looked from Rebecca to the documents on the table, realizing this wasn't an ordinary homeowner meeting. The confidence she had shown moments earlier began to disappear. Rebecca explained that her office was reviewing multiple complaints involving HOA governance and property disputes. She made it clear that today's meeting was part of a broader fact-finding process. Every statement would be carefully documented. The room felt completely different now. Karen's demand stopped, and the conversation shifted toward facts, records, and legal procedures. The same confidence she brought to the front door had quietly vanished. What began as an aggressive confrontation had turned into a formal discussion about documents and evidence. Karen realized the meeting wasn't about intimidation anymore. It was about accountability. And the biggest revelations were still waiting inside those files. Rebecca slowly opened a file nearly 3 inches thick and placed it in front of Karen. Inside were months of complaints, official records, and signed statements from homeowners across the county. Karen stared at the documents, realizing this wasn't just about my cabin anymore. Every page told the same story from a different homeowner. Fines, disputed notices, and questionable board decisions had been carefully documented over several years. The evidence was far more extensive than Karen ever imagined. Karen tried to explain that every action had been approved by the HOA board. Rebecca listened without interrupting, before calmly asking for supporting records. Suddenly, answers that once came easily were much harder to find. I handed Rebecca the binder I had spent years putting together. It contained surveys, photographs, certified mail receipts, and every conversation I had documented with the HOA. Nothing had been exaggerated because the facts were already strong enough. Rebecca compared my records against the state's files one page at a time. The dates, signatures, and property descriptions matched almost perfectly. By now, the direction of the conversation had completely changed. The confidence Karen brought into my cabin had disappeared. Instead of making demands, she quietly watched as each document was reviewed. The silence in the room said more than any argument ever could. The deputies remained professional and allowed the meeting to continue without interruption. Their role was simply to keep everything peaceful while the facts were discussed. No one inside the cabin wanted unnecessary drama. Rebecca highlighted several property maps that clearly defined the lakefront boundaries. Those records had been filed years before the current HOA board took office. They left very little room for misunderstanding. For the first time, Karen carefully studied the surveys instead of arguing about them. The measurements matched every county record we'd already reviewed. The discussion was becoming entirely evidence-based. Rebecca explained how state property laws applied to private lakefront ownership. She emphasized that HOA rules could not override recorded deeds or county property records. That distinction changed the tone of the meeting immediately. Looking out across the lake, I remembered why I had documented everything from the very beginning. Good records often settle disputes better than loud arguments ever can. Patience had finally started paying off. After reviewing the evidence, Rebecca organized the documents into separate investigation files. Each folder covered a different complaint received by our office. Together, they showed a much larger picture than anyone expected. Karen no longer seemed interested in confrontation. Instead, she listened carefully as each document was explained in detail. The atmosphere had shifted from conflict to careful review. By late afternoon, every important record had been reviewed. Property maps, correspondence, and official filings all supported the same timeline. The facts were becoming increasingly difficult to dispute. Rebecca explained that her office would continue reviewing all available evidence before reaching any conclusions. She wanted every fact verified and every record checked carefully. That approach ensured the process remained fair for everyone involved.